everyone, welcome to this video on foundations of ethical data practices. Think about the last time you downloaded a new app. It immediately asked you for your location, your camera, maybe even your context, right? Did you ever stop to wonder why it needs all that? Or what happens to the data once you hit allow? In today's world, we are constantly exposed to digital applications, and data has become the most valuable resources we have. But here's the thing, with great data comes great responsibility. There's a massive demand right now for people who don't just know how to analyze data, but how to do it ethically. This video is unique because we are not just going to talk about the dry rules. We are diving into real world scenarios like how Snapchat uses your facial data or why companies like T-Mobile have faced massive ethical concerns over data breaches. If you want to build trust with your users and understand the legal frameworks that govern our digital world, you'll want to stay tuned. Here's our roadmap for this session. First, we'll break down the 5 key principles of data ethics: transparency, fairness, accountability, privacy, and also security. Second, we'll look into the ethical challenges we face every day, like biases in algorithms, for example, how a resume screening tool might accidentally discriminate against a certain groups. Third, we'll discuss about informed consent. We'll explain why it's critical that users know how their data is collected and who has access to it. Finally, we'll talk about building a trustworthy data ecosystem. We'll cover everything from international laws like GDPR to how organizations can conduct ethical assessment to stay secure. Whether you're a data scientist, a business leader, or just someone curious about your digital rights, this course is for you. Let's jump right in. Also, just a quick information, if you're interested in advancing your career in data analytics and generative AI, the professional certificate course in data analytics and generative AI by IIT Kanpur is perfect opportunity for you. This course, delivered by the esteemed ENICT Academy, provides not just theoretical knowledge but also practical, hands-on learning to help you master industry-relevant tools like Excel, SQL, Python, R, Power BI, Tableau, and cutting-edge generative AI technologies. In this program, we'll also dive deep into data ethics, a critical area where you'll learn how to handle data responsibility, ensure privacy, and make ethical decisions while working with data. Ethical data practices are essential, especially as AI and data analytics continue to shape industries worldwide. With live masterclasses from IIT Kanpur faculty, 12 plus projects, and access to exclusive industry tools, this course is designed to give you skills needed to excel in data-driven decision making and stay ahead in fast-evolving field. So why wait? Apply now and get started on your path to a rewarding career in data analytics and generative AI. The link is given in the description box below and in the pinned comments. Before we dive in, here's a short quiz question to test your understanding. If a company takes the blame for data leak, which ethical principle are they following? Profit, speed, accountability, or marketing? Let me know your answers in the comment section below.
Today, we're gonna talk about data ethics. So it is all about foundations of ethical data practices. Like when we talk about these data practices, it is all about working with data for different purposes. Like you may use data for some data analytics. You may use data to compute some data science activities. You may use data to train your machine learning model. So, people can use this collected data for different purposes, even like it can be used for targeted advertisement and different exercises. So this is like where we talk about what should be the ethical data practices while working with data or database projects and all. So whenever you install a new application on your phone, whether it is an iOS phone or Android phone, this application is going to ask to grant certain permissions, like permissions related to access your location, permission related to access your camera, your microphone, or maybe sometimes your contact details as well. And these permissions are being asked by the applications to provide certain functions which are required for that applications. Uh, the question is, why do you think these phone or these iOS applications need to obtain your approval before accessing certain features? what might happen if these permissions were not necessary, guys? What do you think? Like, what can be the consequences if we do not put these kind of restrictions, or if we do not make user aware about the access of these different features of your phone, services of your phone, guys? So let's suppose there is an application and it is not asking your permission, but it is still using your contact folder, where there is a long list of your personal data can be exposed. Yeah, that's one of the consequences that we can think of. You know, your personal data will definitely get exposed if you if you do not make it transparent, if you do not make it user aware access of that. Okay, what if, let's suppose, if application is tracking your location, consent not taken from user? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Let's suppose the application is not taking any consent, but still it is accessing these part of information. So, when you try to access any kind of these information for the user point of view, this all comes under ethical data practices. Let's suppose if application is accessing your location information, then it can be used for surveillance practices by the applications. And if the user is not aware about that the location is being accessed by the application, this is wrong. Like, you can't be tracked by anyone else just randomly until and unless you are not giving your consent. Nobody can track you, nobody can put surveillance over you. But as nowadays we are mostly what you can say exposed with all these kind of digital applications, so it has become very important to understand what could be the consequences of sharing your personal information from the customer point of view. As the same point, if let's suppose I'm an application builder, now what should my accountability, what should my responsibilities whenever I'm accessing these personal information for my customers? So this is like something we're gonna talk today, and this is like where we try to understand like what is data ethics and what should be the right way to implement data ethic practices in the digital world and kind of thing, guys. So let's quickly go through with the learning objectives of today's sessions. Means at the end of these sessions, I expect that you guys will be able to implement certain standard data ethical practices and legal frameworks in organizations to build customer trust and comply with regulations. That means you first need to understand like what are the ethical data practices and what are the different legal frameworks that you can impose or you can include in your organizations, so through which you can actually build trust between customers and you can comply in the different regulations governed by the government. Then, at the end of this session, we expect that you should outline the importance of obtaining informed consent from individual before collecting, processing, or sharing any kind of personal data. This is very important because in digital world, you can't share any personal information, any customer or individual personal information to anybody else without any consent. So it is very important that if you are collecting or processing any personal information, you need to take the consent of the required person into that process. And finally, at the end of the sessions, I expect that you guys will be able to create solutions to address ethical issues also. That means, let's suppose if somehow there is an error in your system or some data breach has happened, how you can address these issues. If the customer is raising any issues, it is filing any complaint, like how you can address these issues, where you can keep yourself secure by what kind of data practices that you should include in your organization so you can keep yourself more secure into that process, guys. So let's start with introduction to data ethics. And this is the first thing that where we need to understand like what is data ethics and what comes under data ethics. So we can say that data ethics basically address different questions. The questions regarding the different ethical principle guidelines and the standard governing for the collection, use, storage, and sharing of data. So whenever you are collecting the data, what are the principle of collecting a data, using of a data, storing of a data, and even sharing of a data. And I would add one more thing, that is a processing of a data, like how you can process that data also is very important. So data ethics basically covers all kind of practices, all kind of standards, rules and regulations that govern these practices with the data, like how you should collect the data, how you should use the data, how you should storage the data, and if you are sharing the data with any third party, what are the rules and standard to share the data. So data ethics covers all these kind of what you can say, the rules and regulation and standards to be there. Now, when it comes to the data, it requires decision maker to consider impact for their decision on individual, society, and organization. So, that is where like we collect data. And this is something we have understood from our previous sessions also, that we do data analytics because we want to convert your raw data into information. And once you get this information, you can use this information for making better decisions. So this information is basically help you to take better decisions. You can simply say that these decisions are better decisions. So that's what the ultimate goal of of any organization who is doing data analytics or who is dealing some data science project or collecting data for that. Now, when we do this, as I said, like these organizations need to follow some data ethics rules, data ethics standards. So it basically talks about insurance or ensuring the privacy of data, transparency within a data, fairness within a data, accountability in the data handling process. When I say privacy, that means if you are collecting a data, that the data should be securely stored onto your organization and no one, any unauthorized user should not access on that particular data. When I say transparency, it's talking about the data should be used only for the intended purpose. So let's say if I'm collecting a data for any individuals for saying some X work, that should be used only for the X work. The data should not be used for other purposes. That is where we talk about transparency, and here we talk about the consent of the customer or the end users to collect the data while processing them. The fairness is that the data should be used without any bias into that, and that is where the fairness, and we will talk in more detail on that. Finally, talking about the accountability, which is the role of the organization. So if there is any data breach has happened or any inconsistency occur in the whole process, then your organization should make accountable for that, guys. So these are some of the standard, practices that you need to study and you need to understand under data ethics. When we talk about some legal and regulatory frameworks, and so around the world, since this digital data has become very popular and it is become a way of sharing or storing the data. So there are some regulatory framework are being developed or created by different uh, countries. Even some organizations are also involved there, like a federal CDO counseling and the US federal government. So organizations need to obtain certification, so they need to follow the rules and regulations provided by them while this data practices and data processes, guys. So let's first understand what are the key principles of data ethics. As I said, like the very first principle is about transparency, which means that you have to ensure openness about data collection method, storage, and sharing practices. So whenever you go to collect the data, you need to be very transparent. As I said, like if I'm collecting the X information of any user, I have to make it very transparent that how I am going to collect this information, where I am going to store that information, what will be the uses of that information, and if that information is being shared by any third party, then what are the sharing practices. Then you need to be very clear while collecting the data. You need to be very transparent. Second is the fairness. That means it avoids any kind of bias and discrimination in data collection analysis process algorithm. That means if you are collecting a data, let's suppose you are collecting a data for, customer segmentation. You want to conduct a study for a customer segmentation, and now you are collecting a data for that. So while collecting a data, you need to touch upon every section of the customers. It's not that you are only targeting for male customers, or you are only targeting for young customers, or you are only targeting a customer from a specific demographic zone. If you are doing these things, that means you are introducing some biases into the data. And when you are introducing these biases, that means you are discriminating other factors of the data to be take participation into that. Another examples that we can think of, let's suppose I am building a model for resume scrutinization. Okay. So let's say there is a model which basically process the resume, and then it simply give you that whether this particular candidate will be a good fit for interview or not. It's simply a resume scrutinization application that we can think of. So it will give you whether it is a fit or it is a no fit. Now, to develop this kind of model, if I have to collect the data, it should be like that I'm collecting a data from, equal. So it's not that I'm collecting data from mostly a male candidate. If I do this, that means I'm introducing bias towards male category compared to a female category. And automatically, if you go with a biased data to train a model, your model become biased towards male category. And this way, that introduce discrimination. So whenever there is a female resume will come for a scrutinization, it will mostly go for the no fit zone. And this is where like we need to be uh, very much careful while collecting a data, that the data should be collected with full fairness and all. Then talk about accountability, and that's very important from organization point of view. So this holds individual and organization responsible for their data practices. Someone should be there that can be addressed if there any uh, breach happened, or if there any inconsistency happens with the data analysis process or data processing practices and all that. Privacy, it is basically used to protect individuals' right to control over their personal information. So, and every organization and everyone should respect this. So, if the customer is not ready to reveal the personal information, you cannot enforce him. You cannot force him to share that. And finally, the security. So, once you collect the data and you store the data, now it has become your duty that you put some safeguard or some security measures through which an unauthorized access cannot be happened on data, or that data cannot be manipulated by unauthorized user. So these are some key principles of data ethics where we talk about different dimensions we need to look for, and we need to consider all these dimensions with equal importance. Let us understand this with a very common scenario. You must have all used Snapchat, guys. It's a very popular application. So what is this? This is an application which basically take your face, and then it try to play with the face, like by putting some props on it, or maybe try to change your face to a different what you can say, different facial expressions and all this. So it try to add some creative filters that can enhance your selfie with facial recognition technology. So this is the main application you can think of that Snapchat basically pop up. Now, while doing this, it has to access your face. So, it has to access your camera first. So when you put the camera to your face, then it will take the facial image for that. Now it is going to use your facial data. That's very important. That is going to use your facial data for applying all these, features or functions on it. Whether that can enhance your selfie, or you can add some props on your face, and anything, whatever you do that. But at the end of the day, you need to give permissions to access the camera, and then it is going to take the image of your face. So now when we talk about such applications, what could be the ethical considerations while doing this? So very first thing is when we talk about transparency, as we have just seen, what are the key principles of data ethics? So very first is the transparency. That means Snapchat has to clearly explain the facial recognition technology purpose and give user control over their privacy setting. That means whenever we are releasing such kind of features in our applications, you have to clearly explain that what is the technology that they are using to play with your facial image, And over this, they have to give the control power that whether a particular user will give consent to use that face for these purposes or not. So that is like it give full control over the privacy settings. So if user is not interested, he can deny the access of camera for this particular application. This is like where we talk about control, permissions. And like whenever you install a Snapchat kind of application on your system, on your phone, and when you use it first time, it asks for your permission that, this application is going to access your camera. Are you okay with that? Or you have to give the consent for that. The second is fairness. So when you talk about the fairness, it tests algorithm for accuracy across diverse demography to prevent bias and discrimination. So it's not that if you are adding some enhanced, that some selfie or some creative filters on the faces. So it's not like that. It is only working for some specific faces. Maybe some fair faces and it fails on some black faces kind of. So it's not that like that. If the application and algorithm is doing such kind of behavior, that means the application is not fair with respect to the audience, with respect to the different customers of different breed, different demography, different races, and all this. So that should not be there, and that has become the responsibility of the Snapchat makers that the application should equally perform on different race faces or different kind of demographic individual faces and all this. Then accountability. So it has to establish a dedicated team to promptly monitor ethical implication and address user concern. This is something I said earlier. So you need a point of contact. There should be a point of contact which can address any data ethical issues when these are being raised by the customer or individual. Talking about privacy, so it's a very standard that user understand and control how their facial data is collected and used. So whenever this application is collecting any user facial data, user should be very well aware about that how the data is being collected and how it is being used. So whether this should be only be used for some facial enhancement, some selfie enhancement, or that particular data can be used for other purposes of that. So maybe down the line, because Snapchat is going to have the data of millions of faces, Snapchat can be used to train other models for that. So that should be very much clearly defined to the end user. And finally, talking about the security, so the Snapchat has to protect facial data with robust security measures to prevent unauthorized access. It should not be that the data can be stolen by a third party or then it can be misused by someone else. So these are some standard practices, what we listed on the previous slide, like we have to maintain transparency while collecting the data. We have to use the data with full fairness. If you are using any algorithm behind behind the application, that algorithm use the data with full fairness. There should be a point of contact who is accountable for any kind of issue raised by customers or any data breach happened. The data should be collected in a complete private manner with user consent, and the data, when collected, should be safeguarded with proper security measures so any unauthorized user cannot access the data. I hope we are clear with all these points, guys. Now, we understand like what are the key principles of data ethics? Transparency, fairness, accountability, privacy, and security. So, by understanding this, let us try to understand why it is important. Like why we talk about these key principles, why we talk so much about data ethics, rules and regulations in data practices and all. The very first important thing is that it helps you to build trust with individuals. So whenever a user is connecting with you, whenever user is sharing his data with you on any platform, if you come up with all these data ethics principles, it will help you to build trust between you and the customer, the entity. Then it protect individuals and society from any kind of data breach. So if any organization is implementing all kind of data ethic practices, it basically help individuals as well as society for any kind of data breach. That means if you have collected the data and you are storing this data onto any database, you kind of adding some security safeguards so any unauthorized user cannot get access on this data. And this is where like user feels secure that my data is being protected and there should not be any kind of data breach happened over there. So when you implement these data practices, the user get confidence on that, and even the data is being protected by any kind of data breach. Third, it promotes responsible AI developments. That means whatever the AI model are being trained on the data, if you are collecting that data with full fairness and transparency, that means it promotes the responsible AI development. The model will not come with any kind of bias. The model will not do any kind of discrimination for a particular type of individuals. So that also help you to do responsible AI development. And finally, it contributes to a fair and equitable digital future. So everybody is getting equal chance for, move ahead. So that help you to contribute a fair environment where we can move into a digital future. So with this importance, let's talk about significance of data ethics in data analytics. So, like I said, the primary objective of data analytics is to convert your raw data into, but in this process also, we have to collect the data, we have to process the data, we have to store the data somewhere, and then sometimes you have to share the data also. So again, data ethics become very much important in the process of data analytics also. So talking about significance of uh, data ethics in data analytics, data analytics is what? It basically unlocking insights and innovation from your data. That's the primary objective. And when we define it, it reveals the hidden patterns and trends within a data that empower anyone to take decisions. Like it can help you to make informed decisions. This is, I think, we are all well understood that what is the objective of data analytics and how it help you to take well or better informed decisions like in that process. Second, it optimizes process and performance. So data analysis identifies the improvement area. That means when you do these analysis, you can definitely know what are the gaps that you need to fill, what are the shortcomings in the process that you need to address. So in the analysis process, now you will be going to get all these kind of information. So that help you to definitely optimize your existing system in terms of process and performance. And finally, the outcome of the data analytics, once you identify any patterns, once you identify any trends or associationship in the data, you can certainly use this information to train a model that can help you to make future predictions. So these are the basic, the objectives of overall process of data analysis, what we say. Data analysis help you to make better decisions, make more informed decisions. Data analytics can help you to optimize your process and performance of the system. And data analytics can help you to make future predictions in terms of some trends and behavior that you can see from the past data. Now, with this process, when you introduce the ethical considerations, in this process, we talk about bias and discrimination. And this is something I said it earlier also. So when you train any algorithm, when you train any model on a biased data, you know, that model will produce biased result. And when it produce biased result, that introduce discrimination into that. So if you do not follow data ethical principles in data analytics process, you may end up of getting a biased model. A simple term we can say it's a biased model, and biased model is going to introduce discrimination in the process. Privacy concern is another thing. So data collection and analysis can infringe upon individual right of privacy if not handled responsibility, because use cases such as like customer segmentation or use cases such as like Facebook friend recommendations. You have to collect certain personal information of individuals, the demographic detail, the sexual detail, the age, um, even political opinion, the interest rate, the hobby, and all these informations are considered to be personal information. If you do not handle them properly, these informations can be used in other bias, and that you can simply impersonate a person. So a digital entity can be created which is going to impersonate a real identity. So this is very important to have data ethics in the process of data analytics. Lack of transparency, if you are not very clear, with your data practices, that can, introduce some errors, and that can, dent your trust and hinder your accountability also. So data ethics practices are very important in the process of data analytics. This is one of the important aspect, as I said, like, bias and discrimination is very important, because if your data is not collected fairly, it will come with a bias. And when you train any model onto a biased data, the predictions will also going to be a biased, guys. And that will introduce discrimination. So the very first thing is that when we collect the data, we avoid biased data and algorithms. Addressing bias in the data and algorithm is crucial to prevent discriminatory outcome and promote responsible use of it. That's very important, and that's very important concern whenever we build such models that are specifically built for a community, that are specifically built for societal applications kind of thing. While doing this, we ensure algorithmic accountability also. That means we have to create mechanism to hold algorithm accountable, ensure fair and responsible data-driven decision making. And this can only be possible when your data was collected fairly, and each and every section is selected randomly or getting an equal weightage while modeling process. That also promote diversity and inclusion of data teams. So identifying and addressing biases within a diverse data analysis team ensure fairness. So if you find that you see a one category is more than the other category, then you can form teams that can help you to introduce more data points and try to balance the data. This is like where we can handle the bias and discrimination, guys. So let us talk about one of the use case, and that use case is related to one of the feature of Facebook, which is a targeting advertisement. You can call it as targeting advertisement. Now here, if we consider one use case of discriminatory practices, that means in the Facebook is showing a particular ad to a particular community. This is what we call a discriminatory practices. So what could happen? So there is an incident. Let's suppose we listed for 2019 that Facebook faced criticism over a targeting practices allowing potential discrimination based on gender and age for a job advertisement. And this is actually this can be possible. Like, so you can filter and you can say that if I'm issuing or I'm displaying an advertisement, that advertisement should be visible for a particular gender and a particular age group. Now this is where like we talk about discriminatory practices. In that sense, like other people will not get the recommendations for those job openings, and this is where like they feel discrimination, so they will not get chance to get appear into that. So advertisers could restrict ads to a certain age and gender demographic. Now, when Facebook will go with such kind of practices, that means it is introducing discriminatory practices, and this has happened with the Facebook. In the 2019, it has received a lot of criticism over that. But this is one of the feature of that application, guys. So when we use Facebook for social advertisement, we can add different filters. You may add those filters based on gender. You can add those filters based on age. You can add those filters based on certain demography. These are the different features that Facebook has, and you can apply these filters. So the advertisement become targeted advertisement. You can say it's a targeted audience advertisement. It will only be visible for those many users which are passing these filter criteria and all this. So this become a discriminatory practices because it has been raised in 2019 by somebody that this is not right. You are not fair while providing these advertisement or issuing the information to your end user. So the ethical concern in this whole practice is that targeting a specific demographic could lead to unfair exclusion from the job of opportunities. That's very common thing. When you do this, the other people who are not coming from the same demographic reason may not get an equal opportunity to get selection or even to apply for that job. Now, exploiting ad targeting tool could undermine fairness in the job market. Lack of transparency raised accountability and trust concerns. When it goes, your end user, who is the customer, will not be happy because sometimes you feel that you have been discriminated by the platform. That particular ad was not shown to you, and in such cases, you may lose trust with the customer, and there will be some trust concern, and you may lose the customer as well over here, guys. So that is where, the ethical concern. And from this, what lesson is being learned? So you have to put some regularly audit algorithm to mitigate the biases. So, you have to identify like how you can make it better, how you can prioritize the ethical design for ad targeting tools. So whenever we talk about such kind of filters, these filters should not be very harsh, or they should not be in the practice. If you are flowing an ad, that should be flowed to everyone, and everyone should get equal opportunity to see that ad, guys. So this is the very first thing where we talk about one of the scenario of bias and discrimination. The second thing is like we talk about privacy. When we talk about the privacy concern, so privacy concern is mostly related to the personal information of any user. So the best practice that you can use is data minimization and purpose limitation. Okay, so always like whenever you are implementing data ethics practices to any of the applications, you should always try to collect minimum information for an individual. So this is what we call a minimizing data collection. Okay. And you should also store the minimum information. So the information which is not being used for a longer period of time, you should not store them. You should collect them instantly, use it and throw it. So that is basically help you to reduce any kind of security risk or any kind of privacy risk to be involved. So that's a very good thing that is being introduced. Means you only need to collect the piece of information which is required for your application. You should not collect more information about the user, and that's what we call data minimization and purpose limitation. The second is to ensure the security in your system, you have to install some robust cybersecurity measures. So only the authorized user will get the access of the data, and no unauthorized user can access the control. So that's another practice, but it is outside of the data collection process. This is something related to the organization point of view. And there are some clear data breach protocol are also be introduced. That means if there is any data breach happened, how you gonna address them? You have to be very clear with the process. So that's what we call data breach protocols. And when you display these data breach protocols, it basically help you to build trust and safeguards with individual during security incidents. Um, One of the use case is with T-Mobile data breach. That is something we have seen in the past. T-Mobile is a major mobile carrier company. You must have heard this name, guys. And that has been suffered with a big data breach in the January 2024, where some hacker gained unauthorized access to the application programming or API access, and it stole the information of around 37 million customers. And this is a big data, guys. So when you become a customer of any mobile service company, you put a lot of detail, you put a lot of personal detail of you. You put your name, you put your surname, you put your address. And over that, there is a phone number, the mobile number associated with your name. And these are all personal identifiable informations. We call them PII. So in that sense, if any person has got the information of 37 million customers, he is going to be a king in the data side, guys. He can use this information for any purpose. So this breach, like what they learned from this particular incident happened in 2024. This breach exposed sensitive customer data, putting them at a risk of identity theft, phishing scam, targeted marketing. The hacker can use this data for many other purposes. Like it can apply phishing scam. This is very common in India. If you see like a lot of people call you, they try to give you a lot of offers or sometimes threat as well. And then, they ask you to share your accounts or CVV numbers, etc., kind of thing. So they can be used in a phishing scam. This can be used for the targeted marketing also. So this is like where when you expose such important information to an hacker community, that can be used in any purpose. So the lack of proper API security measures raise ethical concern about the company's handling of sensitive data. When it happens, obviously the customer trust will be lost in the whole process, and customer may not rely on T-Mobile further. So what is the lesson learned in this particular incident? So firm must enforce a strong API security. Obviously, the weak interface allow unauthorized access, and in that sense, you may lose the customer information. So you have to enforce a strong API security measure that include access control, breach detection, and ongoing monitoring. And whenever any kind of breach happened, it should shut down the system as well. If the breach late discovery highlight the urgency of promptly detecting anomalies, it's crucial companies clearly communicate with the customer about breaches and remedial actions. So that need to be taken care of otherwise. So that's very theoretical, I guess. So whenever we talk about these incidents, we'll take lessons from them and try to address the issues over that. So here, like we talk about API security, I must say that's important. Okay. The second is we talk about timely detection. So we should have a method. And third is we have to make transparency also to to make your customer aware about these kind of breaches and how you're gonna address them, remediation actions and all this. Any question here? Any other scenarios which is coming to your mind? Do anybody know about any other kind of incident where like we can see the these kind of use cases where we have seen the breach of data, or what is the ethical concern related to that data, and what are the lessons learned from that particular incident? Does anybody know any incident? You're all working in the industry, you must have seen that. Okay, so now let's move to the third, which is a lack of transparency, guys. So, like very much is the bias and discrimination, then the privacy, and third is a lack of transparency. Transparency is all about providing a clear-cut information about data collection and the data analysis and the uses of data. So basically, we can understand and identify the different biases. So you have to tell the user that what type of information you are collecting, how you gonna analyze that information, what is the use case of that information, and where you're gonna store that application information. So this is in that way you can make your system transparent. But when we say lack of transparency, that can introduce some risk or um, some issues in this process. So let's suppose if we talk about algorithm transparency, providing a clear explanation of data collection, analysis, and use ads, understanding and identifying the biases. If we talk about risk and limitation of the communication, the transparently recognized data analytics limitation and risk like biases, foster trust, and informed decision making. And user control over the data, that means you are providing control over their data and ensuring access, correction, and delegation rights, uphold privacy, and prevent the uses. So when you introduce the transparency, at least you have to address these things. Your algorithm should be very transparent in terms of how the data was collected, whether there is any bias in the data or not, and what are the limitations or the risk involved with the communication. That should also be very clear. And finally, you should give the control to the user that if he is not interested, he can actually erase the data. He can modify the data. He can alter the data. It is not like that once the data is being collected, the user has no rights or no control over the data. And one of the use case related to the lack of transparency is with Google incognito mode, guys. So I hope you have seen this incognito mode of Google Chrome. What is the purpose of that? Why we use it? Why we use incognito mode? How it is different from the normal Chrome? No cookies saved by bidding some info. Yeah. No history, no password safe. So that means whenever you do browsing, you know, whenever you browse anything, it remain anonymous. So we believe that whenever we do any kind of surfing, any kind of searching, any kind of browsing, it remain anonymous. So nobody is going to know that who is browsing that information, kind of, because it is not tracking. There are no cookies stored into your local system, no password saved, no history being recorded, and in some way you try to maintain your privacy. But what if, what if you got to know that Google is recording that piece of information while you are working in on incognito mode. Okay. So that's something, that something is one of the scenario. So millions of Google Chrome user relied on incognito mode for private browsing. That is what we use for. So our private information should not be shared over the browser. The location, the passwords, the personal history, nothing is going to be shared. That is something, we rely on that incognito mode. However, you know, there has been a lawsuit alleged Google to continue track user activity even in this mode and creating a privacy controversy. So again, there was a challenge given to Google that even in the incognito mode, you are tracking the user activities, like what kind of browsing it is doing, from where it is doing. Even though we were relying that if I am in incognito mode, my private information is not being shared to anyone else. So that is very important. And in that process, if you go with lack of transparency, this is what a lack of transparency. The very first ethical concern is the deception. You know, that is, Google mislead user about the true capabilities of the incognito mode. So Google has not made its user very much aware about that. Even in incognito mode, there are some pieces of information are collected. There are some users' activities tracked. That is what we call deception. Now, data privacy, the users were expecting uh, that their information is completely private in the incognito mode, but it is violated because the Google was tracking the user activities. And in that process, you can say the Google transparency was not good enough for data collection practices. That means it was lacking in the transparency, guys. So what are the lessons learned from this? That user trust rely on transparent communication and meeting expectations. So if you are claiming any services, if you are fulfilling that services, then only you can say that you are able to, be being able to earn the trust and you became a full transparent. Understanding the limitation of incognito mode and exploring better privacy options can help make informed online decisions. So that is you should make aware, and then in that way, like you can make your users more informed, and accordingly it can use the incognito mode. And then if Google is collecting that data, that is okay, but that can be used for non-purposes or transparent guys. So these are the three major areas where we talk about the practices of data ethics in data analytics. One is related to the bias and discrimination. Second one is the privacy, and third one is the transparency, guys. So now we can talk about ethical analytics. Ethical analytics means data ethical practices in data analytics for better future. The very first thing is we want to build trust technology or trust in the technology. So when you enforce all these key principles, accountability, transparency, privacy, security, and fairness, these are the five principles of data ethics. When you introduce them into a data analytics process, it helps you to building a trust in the technology. Ethical data practices build trust, fostering responsible technology advancement. Promoting inclusivity and social justice. So when you remove biases in the data analytics process, that introduce fairness, and that is good for the society. Shaping responsible AI development. I think this is something I have already explained you. When you introduce a fair data in the model training, your model will give you fair judgment. If you introduce biasness in the data, your model become biased to a particular category, which is not good for the society. So when we talk about introducing data ethics in data analytics process, especially in developing models, it will help you to shape responsible AI development. And then safeguarding individual rights and freedom. So when you introduce privacy rules, when you introduce security, enough security, that help you to safeguard individual personal information as well. It also preserve the individual rights of the information. Right. So if the user is ready to share his personal information, that is okay. If it is not shared, that is also okay for it. Let's have a quick recap on whatever we have discussed, guys. It is more of a theoretical. So, which principle emphasize collecting only the necessary information for a specific purpose, reducing sensitive data and storage? One is transparency principle, data minimization principle, cybersecurity principle, or explainability principle. What do you think? What is the right option? Yeah, so you can say B is the right option that basically talks about collecting only the necessary information. You should not collect the information which is not required for the application or for the use case that you are solving. In that way, you only collect minimum information and you store minimum information. So, that's not good to store sensitive data in a huge amount because if any data breach happens, that way you lose the trust of the customer base. So right option is B. That's correct. Now let's talk about ethical challenges in data analytics. So we have seen like what are the common key principles. So the common key principles are like, you talk about transparency, you talk about fairness, you talk about accountability, you talk about privacy. And when you introduce these data ethics into data analytics, you talk about three major things. One is biasness and discrimination. Second, you talk about the privacy concern. And third, you talk about lack of transparency. This is something we have seen till now. Now, when you introduce them, so what are the challenges? What are the ethical challenges that you see like when you introduce these things into that? Let us discuss them and try to understand them in detail. So let us suppose we take a scenario where there is a mobile application that tracks user location, and that location data provides personalized recommendations and advertisement. So remember what application is doing? It is actually collecting the location of the user, means demographic information. And this application is using this information to provide personalized recommendation and advertisement. Users are unaware of the extent of data collection and have limited control over how their data is used. So that is the current scenario. So application is not giving the access or the control to the user, so it can actually modify the data. And there is a only limited content, limited control is given. And even the user is not very much aware that how much extent the data will be used or how it is being collected, guys. So with this scenario, what do you think? What are the ethical concerns associated with above scenario? Or if you look for that, what are the lessons that you will learn? Very good. One, you can say the privacy. If you do not have a full control how the data is used, you can say the privacy is one of the concern. Personal data is being used. That's right. Can you say there is a lack of transparency also available here? If you do not know that how much extent the data is being collected and it is being used, can I say that transparency is also not very much available here? If you are using this for a personalized recommendation and advertisements, what is the issue related with that? Security also involved. You are putting a surveillance kind of system. You are tracking the personal location. Okay, so with that, what do you think? If these are the concern, what are the lessons learned from this scenario? What we need to put, what we need to introduce in our organization, what we need to introduce in our application process? Very first, we need to put a very clear-cut transparency policy that tells about that we are collecting this amount of data from you, and this data will be used for that purpose only. Then you need to have a proper privacy policy also. Okay, so there will be a clear-cut transparency and privacy policy. Then you have to provide a proper security mechanism to safeguard the data, and you have to provide a proper control over the data as well. So if the user is interested, it can actually change its information and settings. So going with scenario, we can say that it is actually violation of privacy rights, lack of informed consent, potential for targeted surveillance, and manipulation. So these are some ethical concerns that are listed here. And what are the lesson learned? So need to for a clear, transparent data privacy policies. You have to put user control over data collection and uses, and then need to put a robust security measures for protect user data. Are we good with these guys? Lesson learned and ethical concern. Let us talk about a second scenario. There is a second activity which is given to us. Let's suppose a company uses an AI-powered recruitment tool for screen resume. I think this is the same which I've discussed. The algorithm unknowingly perpetuate gender bias, favoring male candidate and significantly reducing the visibility of female applicants. What are the ethical concern over here, guys? Fairness is one. Fairness, or you can say bias and discrimination. Lack of transparency is also be here. The algorithm unknowingly perpetuates gender bias, favoring male candidate and significantly reducing the visibility of female applicant. Data uses, you know. So what are the lesson learned from here? Let's suppose. What are the lesson learned from here? You have to introduce more fairness in data collection and the uses of data to remove biasness and discrimination. So you see that this is what we get. A company uses an AI-powered recruitment tool to screen the resume. And if the algorithm unknowingly favor the male candidates, it introduces ethical concern in terms of discrimination based on protected characteristics. There is a lack of transparency in algorithm development and potential for unfair hiring practices. That has become your ethical concern here. Because if your model has a bias towards male candidate, automatically female candidate get rejected. So it is an unfair hiring practice. Now, what is the lesson learned? So it is an importance of fairness audits of algorithm that should be very transparent in recruitment process and awareness of potential biases in the data. So you need to add some practices through which you can identify those biasness, even like if the model is doing such predictions or such practices, that will able to give you the true judgment after this, guys. Now let's have a quick check. What is a crucial ethical consideration when collecting and using user data? Is it maximizing data collection without user consent? It is ensuring transparency and obtaining informed consent from user. It is selling user data to third party without disclosure. It is ignoring data security measures to expedite data processing. So what is a crucial ethical consideration when collecting and using user data is that you have to ensure transparency and you have to obtain information with a proper consent from the user. That's the right option. And that is all like we discussed, guys. So this is option B is the right option in that. And now let's talk about some legal and regulatory framework, guys. So because this is a very important thing to have to any organization, especially in today's time when we are collecting a lot of data. And like the data which is collected in 1 second today, the amount of data was collected in a whole year in 1990. Now you can see at what pace and what volume we are collecting the data today. So the data that is collected even in 1 second was the total data that was collected in 1990. Yeah, the total whole year. So when you are collecting such amount of data at such a speed, you need to introduce some data ethics practices. If you do not employ them, you know, uh, you may lose the user trust and the system will become biased, unfair, intransparent, and all these things together. So there is a need to have some regulatory framework. There is a need to have some legal framework. So if any organization found not to follow the data ethics practices, how you can address them. So you need a system, you need a framework through which you can actually address them, guys. Let's start about legal and regulatory framework under data ethics. First of all, let us see that what are these. So you can simply define them. These are set of laws and rules. And the basic objective of these rules is to govern ethical data practices. So when I say ethical data practices, which means like we talk about how to use the data, how to store the data, how to process the data, and if you are sharing data to third party, what are the rules of sharing these data? So legal and regulatory frameworks are basically there to govern these ethical data practices, and they ensure the ethical standards are need to be imposed in every organization, every data organization, when it is collecting, storing, using, or sharing the data. So finally, now we have a framework through which we can define the key principle of data ethics, and we also have a system, or you can say a regulatory framework, who is going to govern all these key principles need to be implemented in data organizations. The basic aspect of legal and regulatory frameworks are basically talk about privacy laws. Now, these laws are mostly related to the data protection of individuals' data. And the common law is what we call GDPR. And the GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation that is in Europe, you can say. And there is another law called CCPA. It's like California Consumer Policy Act. And these are the two laws which mainly being defined to govern the privacy of an individual information. That individual could be a customer, that individual could be a client of a particular service provider company. He can be a, the bank customer or telecom customer, any customer like. So this is like where we have a specific set of rules that defines the privacy framework of any individual's personal information. Then we talk about data protection laws. Like these laws basically defines or outlines the different kind of safeguards and measures taken by the data organizations, and these need to be implemented whenever any organization is going to store the data. So this is all related to what we call a data protection laws. And these laws are not only to impose while any organization is storing the data, even like when it is sharing the data and all. That talks about the transparency and consent. And this is very much important. So when any data organization is collecting data from any individuals, these law or these frameworks emphasize on the importance of adopting some transparency practices. Like, so when you are collecting a data, you need to tell very clearly that these are the pieces of informations we are collecting for any information, and that will be the purpose of collecting that information. So let's talk about obtaining and uses of the data. So it should be very clearly defined that if I'm interacting with any customer, if I'm interacting with any client, these piece of information is going to be collected in that interaction, and that will be the use of that information. So this is like where we talk about transparency and consent. Finally, it talk about data ownership and right. So this is define the individual rights over the ownership of the data. And this is like where we talk about the right of access, right of correct, or you can say update, as well as right of delete. So if I'm not interested in terms of sharing my information, even later when I have shared my information earlier, I can even have the control to delete that particular information. And this is where we talk about data ownership and rights. Finally, accountability and compliances. And this is a legal framework that measures the accountability and the compliances of the accountability that is required to implement all data practices, procedures within the organization. So that is related to your accountability. And finally, we talk about cross-border data transfer. And this is like where we talk about sharing of a data. So when it is like a sharing of a data, that means if you are sharing your data to any third party, what are the rules and regulation of sharing the data, and how you wanna share, whether it will be an encrypted format or in an open format. So, there should be an ethical framework or the complete regulatory framework that is defining that particular process. And finally, the ethical consideration that is beyond the legal requirement, I must say that. So obviously, you cannot cover each and everything with the law. Even people need to be moral and ethical while users of these data. So they should always use the data responsibly. And that is what we talk about some ethical considerations using them. So it talks about fairness, it talks about no discrimination, it talks about biasness. So these are all ethical considerations that need to be put together. So the major key aspect of any legal or regulatory frameworks are these seven, where we talk about privacy law, where we talk about data protection law, transparency and consent framework, data ownership law, accountability and compliances law, cross-border yani data sharing law, and finally some ethical considerations regarding the fairness, the biasness, and the discrimination. Now, with these key aspects, there are some global frameworks available which basically help us to govern these practices and need to be adopted by all the data organization. And some of them are very popular. Like the very first is the GDPR, which is a Journal Data Protection Regulation. This is being defined by European system, and this is mainly for protecting the individual's data privacy and rights. So when you talk about the private information or the personal information of any customer and users, these laws are basically help them to make the protection. The second is CCPA, which is a California Consumer Privacy Act. And this is again, it is a US law that granting Californians control over their personal data. And when I say the control over the personal data, that means any individuals is free to share his information, updated information, or even delete his information whenever it is required or whenever he is interested in doing that. Then the third one is the China's Personal Information Protection Law, PIPL. It is a comprehensive data privacy framework, and it is again talking about the PII information. So you understand the data privacy is very big concern in the digital world, and nobody is ready to share his personal information without his proper consent, guys. And then there are some sector specific regulation. The sector related to the healthcare, the sector related to the finance. So you must have heard about HIPAA. Guys, have you heard about HIPAA? It's basically a kind of framework that governs that how the health data or the patient data is being shared across different entities. So you see, these are some global frameworks which are basically very popularly used across the globe to protect your data ethics principle, even your privacy rights and security measures. Now, when we talk about the challenges, so there are certain compliance challenges with data regulation. Although we have defined these frameworks, although we have defined these law practices, but there are even certain challenges when we see the implementation of these rules and regulation into the data organization. So when we talk about organizations, they may encounter challenges in complying with the data regulations, such as constantly evolving regulatory landscape, which means that whenever we see there is any incident occur, even though we have laws, but still, you can't stop crime. So similarly, you can define a legal and regulatory framework, but this doesn't mean that it will secure your data forever. Hackers and attackers will always have a way to bypass your system. Maybe they can find any vulnerability in your system, or they can find any backdoor through which you can, access the data. So their violation is always there. So you need to, harden your rules periodically. That means you have to evolve these regulatory landscape. So when these landscape are being evolved, you have to change your whole data storage policies. You have to change your data schemas, and this is one of the challenge which is faced by small organization. You have to change your complete database schema if there is any regulatory changes taking place into the landscape. Then there is always a persistent threat of data breaches, which I said, like these attackers and hackers are always there to find a new way that how they can introduce privacy breach or data breaches in your systems and all. Now, next is balancing ethical data practices and innovation. So this is very important, and this is where we need to, understand. And one of the examples, if you take, like we talk about recommendation systems. and we talk about personalized recommendation system. So what is recommendation system? Recommendation system is basically a way through which you can recommend a piece of information or piece of item or piece of entities which are of user preference or interest. So let us say whenever there is a user, okay, and let's suppose this user likes crime thriller movies, okay, then Netflix should only recommend crime thriller movies to it. In that way, Netflix can expect more engagement of this user to its platform. And this is what we call recommendation. So recommendation system has become an integral part of every service platform, whether it is a Netflix, whether it is a YouTube. So you must have observed this or experienced the YouTube recommendations. When you start watching a type of videos, you get recommendation of very similar videos. Have you observed this behavior of YouTube? Like when you start listening a kind of music, you start getting recommendation of similar genre of music. So this is like, this is what we call recommendation. Whether it is, the make my trip, whether it is a trip advisor. So any service based platform is now being implemented by a recommendation engine. And the objective of recommendation engine is to provide recommendation to its customer. So in that way, they basically try to increase engagement. So people start spending more time to their platform. In that way, they earn more. So recommendation system has become one of the integral part. Now, whenever we talk about user have different taste, different preferences. So what we want personalized recommendations. So maybe the items recommended to you will not be liked. So these platform always try to understand the user preferences. They try to understand the user taste, and based on that, they start making recommendations. In that way, the user spend more time to the platform. So we call them personalized recommendations. This is what we call a personalized recommendation. But this personalized recommendation will only be possible when the platform know more about the user. Okay. So this is where like we talk about balancing between ethical data practices and innovation. If I say that I want to know more about this user, I have to collect its personal information. I have to collect his gender, age group, its hobbies, dislikes, like that. So whenever I start to collect such pieces of information, I kind of uh, start to getting personal information about the user. And this is where you need to have a balance between, if you are collecting a personal information, you have to be very much careful of handling those pieces of information. But if you do not collect that information, you might lack with a more personalized recommendation. That means you might lack with the innovation. So it's kind of a balancing between ethical data practices and innovation. Balancing data practices are saying you have to collect minimum information, isn't it? So when you connect minimum informations, you might lack in the innovation. So that's where we have to set the balance between them. And next is the resource constraint for a smaller organization. This is another challenge. So if there is an organization which is pretty small, it's kind of a startup. And when you talk about applying all these kind of data ethical practices into that, you need to purchase certain licenses, even the resources. So these resources are not available. So small organizations may violate some of the data ethical practices. There are certain challenges. So in that way, you can call them challenges, and accordingly, you have to tackle them. Now, next, discuss about the best practices for ethical data governance. So, if you are imposing any data governance system to that, what are the best practices to have them? The very first is that you conduct a data ethic assessment, and that should be periodically. So that means you have to evaluate practices through an ethical lens regularly. So if you are considering any organization, let's suppose ABC, it is a data organization which is collecting and using a data. So that data organization need to go through with certain, the scrutiny test in a periodically way. So it has to talk about all the kind of standard data ethic practices, and it has to prove that all these practices are well maintained and adhere by the organization. And this is what we call a conduct a data ethic assessment in periodically way. Then the next is implement data minimization principle. This is something very important because that automatically ensures is that if you store minimum data, you have less chances to have a data breaches or loss of data of that. So always implement these practices. These are the standard practices which talks about collect and store only necessary data. Do not store unnecessary data. Next is your system must impose the obtained informed consent. If you are collecting any personal information, you have to take the consent from the user. So you should have a proper communication with respect to the data collection and uses purposes clearly. Next is enable data access and correction. So this is like giving a control to the user. So user can actually update or access its personal data whenever it is required. And finally, build a culture of data ethics. So, whenever you train your employee, it is something that you need to inject in the employee that you have to follow all the kind of data practices. This is your moral duty. Like, you have to be ethical from inside. It's not that there is a regulatory unit or there is a legal unit which is enforcing you to adopt these practices. This is something that you should adopt by your own heart, so you have to adopt these practices. You should not malfunction with any information. You should not use any information. You should not misuse any information, personal information in any ways. So these are some best practices that we can think of considering an ethical data governance framework, guys. So with this, now let's talk about this question. Like, what do regulations like GDPR, CCPA primarily focus on? The very first is ensuring encryption of sensitive information, defining individuals' right regarding their data, outlining measures of data protection, and establishing transparency and consent. What do you think? What is the right option, guys? GDPR and CCPA. That's great. This is B. These law define individuals' right regarding their data. That means these are all data privacy law. Okay, so now let's discuss about some of the use cases, and there are some legal consequences happens of the data misuse, and this is something happened in our history, and we learned lesson from that. The very famous case is of case of Cambridge Analytica. How many of you heard about this, guys? Cambridge Analytica, the Facebook privacy breach, yeah, data leak, yeah. Saurabh, what exactly this? So this Cambridge Analytica was used to be a data organization, okay, and it played a very significant role in the U.S. election in 2016. So 2016 election, U.S. election, this was won by Donald Trump, and Donald Trump hired one of the senior vice president from this particular organization just to, use data science algorithms to change the mood of the voter kind of thing. So Cambridge Analytica did what? They harvested the personal data of millions of Facebook users without their consent, and then they used it to create a targeted political advertisement during the 2016 US president election. There is a very nice documentary movie created on this incident. I think the movie name is The Great Hack. You can find this movie on Netflix, or I think on Google if it is available. But this movie pretty much well explained that how that whole conspiracy was carried out during the 2016 US presidential election. How the Cambridge Analytica played its significant role in changing the mood of voter, and finally, the Trump won that election. So this was the incident happened in 2016, and that was actually discovered later. And the documentary was filmed over that particular lady who played a key role in leading that election campaign. And she was giving interview in that movie, so you can watch and just understand the power of data science and how if you use the data, sorry, if you misuse the data, how much dent you can do onto any label or in any business. So Anyway, this happened in 2016, but later this was discovered. So when this was discovered, there were some legal consequences also. So both companies faced massive fines and reputation damage. That's very much first thing. Cambridge Analytica and Facebook both were fined and their reputation went down also. Facebook incurred a $5 billion fine from Federal Trade Commission for violating user privacy and failing to the protect of their data. And Cambridge Analytica shut down following the instruction. So that company was shut down even following that instruction. So now you see the legal consequences. Even you can, you will be in a situation where you have to shut down your organization or your firm, kind of. So this is one incident which is very popular in the field of data science, and where we see the misuse of data, and one of the case study that we should all see, and why we talk about to imposing these data ethics practices in our data organizations. The second one is the Marriott. So we all know about Marriott Hotel series and all, guys. So this was not intended, but some hacker compromised the Marriott system and accessed the personal information approximately of 5 million guests, including their passport numbers, credit card details, and all these things. So this is like a biggest personal data breach, I would say. So that happened, and with respect to that, there were again some legal consequences faced by the Marriott, and the Marriott was fined around 110 million euros. This was imposed by UK Information Commissioner Office (ICO), and for failing to implement adequate security measures to protect guest data. Basically, uh, you can say that somehow the private data information breach was there. The company also faced a lawsuit from affected guests and reputational damage was there. So these are some you can take these example as a use case study where we have seen some big data breaches and misuse of personal data, and then there are legal consequences faced by these organizations. Yes. Is anybody know any other scenario here, like similar to these two scenarios, and he knows about that? How many of you have heard about salami attack? So there was an attack known as salami attack. It was actually imposed on American Express Bank. Okay, and the attacker did a very simple thing, like so it used to steal a money in you can say if you come into an Indian currency, I would say try to steal a paise kind of thing. So let's say if an account there is an interest incurred about 112 rupees 43 paise. Okay, so it tried to steal this 3 paise and deposit it into its own account kind of system. So every time when there is a interest incurred in any of these account, it tried to steal that paise. In that way, he was able to steal around 1 to 9 paise each time. So if it is like 67 paise, like 860 rupees, 67 paise, then it will stole like 7 paise out of it. Okay. So this is the kind of virus he was able to inject it into the banking system. And after a few months, he was able to, collect around some crores of dollars in his account, guys. So this is where again, the American Express Bank failed to secure his system, and the person was able to inject a virus and created a fake account, and then he was transferring money during that. So this is a very famous attack, guys. You may go and Google it and learn about that. But you so the moral of the story is that in the past we have seen uh, the misuse of data, the misuse of framework, the misuse of the APIs and all kind of structures. So there is a very important aspect that you need to apply some data ethics principle into your systems. Yeah, Jamtara kind of scam is also being there. Saurabh, I do agree with you. But this is more onto a cyber attack. So it's not a particular data organization, but yeah, you can say that the uh, boys, Jamtara boys were collecting the personal data from somewhere. So they had a way through which, like they were able to obtain the user information in terms of phone number, their name, okay, and there are even some demographic information is also there. Now they can use it for phishing attack. So that this is kind of a phishing attack. They were able to do that. Okay, and sometimes the card number also. So they had a way through which like they were obtaining these piece of information about individuals, and then they start to put some phishing attack on them by calling them or by you know um, uh, messaging them or maybe on some other way emailing them. So yeah, so these frauds are always in the market, but this is not because of like the system has any breach. Maybe they have some way through which obtaining the data. Here we are more talking about, let's suppose if you are a data individual point of view, you need to be very careful while sharing any of your personal information. It is either your location, it is either your phone number, it is either your name, it is either your gender, your political opinion, anything related to your personal identification. You should not disclose his passport number, credit card number. These are all come into PII, what we call personal identifiable information. Now, as a data organization, I have to secure that information. I have to secure their information individual need to. So when we say access their personal data stored in organization, rectify the inaccuracies in the data, erase their data under certain circumstances, and object to the processing of their data to a specific purpose. So these are the certain checkpoints what we need to put it on that. But when we do this, the organization has to go through certain challenges that they have to establish a robust mechanism for data security, privacy, and concern management. These three things are very important. So when you have collected the data, the data need to be secure. So there should not be any unauthorized access happen to be on data. Uh, the privacy law must be followed. So you should not collect unnecessary private information of any individuals. You should always collect the minimum information what is required. And whenever you collecting that information, you have to take the consent from the user as well. So that consent management should also be in place over there, guys. So to secure their information, we have to go through with this. It's a simple. In that process, we have to implement some data security. Okay. And as I said, like minimization can be one of these steps. So when we talk about security, it means implementing all the security measures or safeguards that protect your data from any unauthorized access, any kind of disclosure, alteration, or destruction of the data. So sometimes, hackers can simply run a delete command. Okay. If he is not able to access that, he can delete it. He can destroy the data. That should also not be possible. So you have to implement sufficient safeguards or sufficient security measures that can protect the personal data from unauthorized access or any kind of deletion. Second is minimize the collection and storage of personal data, and that's very important data practice. You should only collect the data what is useful to you. You should not collect any unnecessary data. What is necessary and what is identified purpose. That's the only thing. So when that way you can securing and minimizing the data help prevent breaches and minimizing the potential harm to the individuals if breach occurs. So let's suppose if any breach occurs in the data storage policy, the minimum information should be exposed to the end user like that. Data privacy. So after the security, we talk about data privacy. So when we say data privacy, it basically talk about the individual's fundamental right to control over their data. So when I say control over their data, that means they have a full right to know that how the data is being collected, how it will be used, and how it will be stored. So this is very important in terms of to knowing that. Then it should be very transparent that who has the access to it. It should be very transparent to understand the purpose for which it is used. And the full right control is that the user must access, rectify, and erase their data whenever it is required or whenever he thinks it to be appropriate. So data privacy basically talks about these 4 points. Right to know how the data is collected, how it is used, how it is stored, right to identify who is going to access the data, a right to understand the purpose for which the data is used, and right to access, to rectify, erase, and modify their data. An organization need to ensure that individuals provide informed consent to use of their personal data. So this is something you need to be inbuilt in, guys. And finally, we talk about informed consent. So when we collect this, so there is a consent need to be taken. So you have to respect individual's autonomy. That means if he is not ready to share, that's his choice. He is not going to share. But whenever you are collecting the data, you have to take a proper consent from that. In that way, it will trust and transparency. Okay, it will protect individuals from exploitation and harm, and it follow the ethical and responsible data practices. So that is very important. That is very important when we talk about this informed consent practices implemented in data organization. With this, we talk about building a trustworthy data ecosystem. So when we say trustworthy data ecosystem, we need to be very lawful. Okay, so the law defined around the globe, whether it is if a domain specific law or a privacy law or security law or sharing data law, we have to, very lawful. So data processing must adhere the consent and contract to the legal obligations. Then second is a fair. Data must be processed in a very fair way. There should not be any bias and discrimination or prejudicial introduced in the data processing part. An organization must take proper responsibility of data handling practices. So if there any data breach happened, okay, if there is any data issue happened, someone should be there to take the responsibility and fulfill the accountability of the system, right? And then finally, building a responsible data future. This is where we talk about it required a concerned effort from various stakeholders. If we are really very serious about that. So we need governments that must establish strong data protection regulations to ensure effective enforcement. We need industries to develop and implement best practices that prioritize ethical data handling. We need technology innovation that can provide powerful tool to navigate the data landscape responsibly. We need raising public awareness or educating individuals about their rights can create a more informed and empowered digital citizenship. And finally, we need an international cooperation and harmonization for data privacy regulations that can create more consistent and robust framework. So this is something we required from our environment, from the governments, from the education sector, from the industry sector, even from the international entities. So when they come together, we can think of building a responsible data future, guys. So let's have a quick question on it. What fundamental rights do individually have concerning their personal data in context of data privacy? The right to process personal data, the right to sell personal data to third parties, the right to access, rectify, and erase personal data, and the right to store personal data indefinitely. The right to access, rectify, and erase personal data. That's right. Under the data privacy, we want a full control over user data. So in that way, you can think it has a right to access, rectify, and erase personal data. We'll come back to this guided practice. Before that, let us discuss what are the key takeaways of today's discussion, guys. And please let me know if you are not clear with any of these points. So can I say like transparency, fairness, accountability, privacy, security are the fundamental principle of ethical data practices, and we are all understood the role of these key principal points. These are the 5 data ethical practices, principle of data ethical practices. Next, fairness, privacy, and transparency are key ethical considerations that guide data analysis process. So when we do the data analysis, we need to be very fair in terms of data collection. We need to maintain the privacy, individual's privacy, and we have to be very transparent while collecting a data to tell what is the purpose, what information is being collected, and what intended purpose is it. Can I say that? For the data analytics, these are the 3 main important key ethical considerations, guys. Are we good with this? Next is crafting effective strategies help in navigating and resolving ethical dilemmas that rises in data analytical. Are we good with this? Understanding this point, crafting effective strategies help in navigating and resolving ethical dilemma. So there are certain challenges, but if we can craft certain strategies, if we follow the data practices, that basically solve our data ethics problem. Ethical decision making enhance trust, collaboration, and reputation, reduces risk, ensures legal compliances, foster innovation, and contribute in social well-being. So if any organization follows data ethical practices, if the decision making is all ethical, not like Cambridge Analytica or material table use case, can we say that that will help you to build the trust among users, that help to build the reputation of the organization, and that help to ensure all the kind of legal compliances, even foster innovation, and all these things will happen. Ultimately, the final context of this point is that if we implement all the principal data practices in the organization, it will create better data future. It will create better environment with strong trust among stakeholders. And finally, we have some legal and regulatory framework govern ethical use of data. These framework covering laws, rules, guideline, and obligation for responsible data handling and privacy. We have seen three. One is European, you know, GDPR, then PIPL from China, and I think CCPA from US, California. So these are the popular, and then we have some domain-specific rules and regulation governing body resource. So that's something like the major key points from today's discussion. And these are some additional resources. These are available on your presentation. You can explore more about them, like what are the ethical imperatives for data sharing, like how you can share your data, and what are the data ethics for open data sharing, some new rules for data privacy and how to protect privacy and data feed societies, guys. So this is for your extra learning to be there. And now we can talk about this guided practice. So this guided practice is not anything where you have to use any tool. It's only talk about what are the common practices that you can use to, support that. And I believe you will see this document related to the foundation of ethical data practices. And the objective of this exercise is to apply principle of data privacy when handling and dealing sensitive and personal information in real-time scenarios. While working through with this case study, our realistic scenario and problem, participant can practically engage with classroom concept and context that mimic the actual professional task. So we have few questions, and you guys need to think about that how you gonna, implement these policies into your organization. Let's suppose if I ask you like how to handle sensitive customer data. So what is your way after learning all these data ethical practices? Like how you can handle this customer data? Anyone who can put the answers in the chat box, guys? You can individually contribute in this practice. If I ask you how you will handle the sensitive customer data, what will be your data practices for that? Securing the data, that is very good. What next? How you can secure the data? Can you use some encryption methods? Okay, so uh, let me show you the answer key. So your scenario is you want to accessing the customer data. Your task is to respond to a customer query while ensuring the highest standard of data privacy. So what you can do, you can log into a secure customer information system using authorized credential. Then locate the customer profile based on the information provided in their email. That's very first thing. This is way that you are securing your data for only authorized access. Then you can draft a email. So it's not that you can share this information on any platform. It is where like that particular platform should be used, that should be secure. So you can draft a concise and relevant response to the customer query avoid including any unnecessary personal detail in the response. So this is what we are possessing the minimization principle. Only use the intended information. Do not add any kind of unnecessary information. Then you should add a consent confirmation. So if the customer query requires sharing additional information, include a polite request for the consent. Clearly explain why the information is needed and how it will be used. In this way, you are actually maintaining the transparency. Then secure communication. If the secure communication method are available, such as encrypted messaging system, secure customer portal, use these channel. Avoid sharing sensitive information over regular email. You should not use that because it is a personal private data. And at the end of this, you can add data deletion request. If the customer requests data deletion, provide information on the process, confirm their consent to process with the deletion of the ensure compliances. So once the task is fulfilled, you should request to delete that information. In that way, you are actually securing your personal uh, customer sensitive data. Are we clear with these steps, guys? This is all theoretical. This is all theoretical. This is all ethical, where how you should respond with such sensitive cases, such sensitive issues, guys. Now, what are the key aspects of legal and regulatory frameworks that basically introduce here? So, one is the privacy law, because we are talking about sensitive information that is definitely being protected here. Then data protection law that talks about data security, that how you should store the data, how you should transfer the data. The transparency and consent law that talks about taking the consent from the end user if I'm sharing your data, so that takes the transparency and consent. And the data ownership and rights, that means you are taking the consent that once the job is finished, you can delete the data. So you are giving a full control over the data, whether the intended use is fulfilled or purpose is fulfilled or not. And finally, accountability and compliances. So there is a legal framework establish accountability and measures for the organization, which is required to implement all these internal policies. The policies which will follow all these steps, like step 1 to E, A to E. So there should be some policy which is making the organization accountable, that it is following the all data ethics standards and going there. When if it is a cross-border data transfer, then obviously some more regulations are need to be introduced, and this is something we discussed. And finally, like ethical consideration, we talked about that. So beyond the legal requirement and framework that are included, this may also involve some fairness and non-discrimination. This is something, you cannot define it very firmly, because there are few areas where the rules cannot be defined very mathematically. So always you have to come up with your ethical sense, what is right, what is wrong into that, guys. And what are the key provision under China's personal information protection law? So this is something you definitely need to explore on the BAPE. What are the key provisions? We have just studied about China's personal information protection law, PIPL, which is mainly for the protecting the private information, personal information. But because it is a personal information law, so you can logically define that it talks about all the rules and frameworks that talk about privacy or protecting the personal information. That means consent. You have to take the consent before obtaining the information. Data transfer, data subject right, to access, correct, to delete. There should be a data protection officer in your organization who should be a point of contact if any issue or if any breach happened. Uh, what is the sensitive data? You need to be accountable, and there is some legal liabilities also be included into that. So these are some points that are actually being included in China's personal information protection law. This is something you can find while exploring and doing some self-study also, guys. So this is a guided practice that basically help us to impose data practices into your organization in different scenarios. Uh, as you know, that's my understanding going forward. We currently every organization has this one officer who actually responsible or accountable for all these data ethical practices. Going forward, I think we will have one officer who is responsible for AI ethical practices also, because data and AI is now very closely working. So maybe you will see such jobs and such posts in a big organizations very soon, guys. So that's it about today's content, guys. Let me know if you have any question. I think today we ended up early. We did not have much content to discuss today, more theoretical as well.
With that, we have come to the end of our course. If you have any doubts or questions, ask them in the comment section below, and a team of experts will reply to you as soon as possible. Thank you and keep learning with Simplilearn.